This is not a problem at all. The innkeeper almost burst out in tears. The reason Zhou wanted 2 rooms was very simple. Although little Yuana was a simple and innocent girl, she was almost 16 and no longer a child. It was not convenient for them to stay in the same room. Zhou slowly went up the stairs while little Yuana followed with a triumphant look. When he walked past a man, he glanced at the 2 swords in his arms. The couple swords? The man was a little surprised and puzzled. You have a pair of keen eyes, old mister. One of them is long and carved with dragons, and the other is short and carved with phoenixes. They both are peak Earth-grade weapons, barely touching the heaven-grade. Zhou said, while stroking his beard, since you know them, you should be careful about the way you talk to me. If it were at other times, I would certainly use them to teach those who insult them a lesson. While keeping a straight face and a watchful eye on little Yuana, he shook his head and said, the sword have killed countless foes and been tempered for dozens of years, which made them heaven-grade weapons a long time ago. They are not Earth-grade weapons like you just said. Zhou stroked his beard and did not refute, and the man continued. In my opinion, there is no weapon in this world sharper than the couple swords. Just then, little Yuana said curiously from the side, Are you using both swords yourself? The man shook his head. I use the long sword, and my brother uses the short sword. Oh, so you and your brother are a pair of, well, how did a neurotic man like you reach the divine court realm? Zhou thought as he stroked his beard. Of course, he kept a calm face, so that no one could tell his emotions. The swords are sharp? Zhou asked doubtfully. The man did not say anything. Instead, he drew the short sword, the edge of which reflected a cold gleam as soon as it left the sheath. Then, while holding it horizontally with his right hand, he plucked a hair from his head with his left hand and lightly blew at it. The hair fell weightlessly onto the edge and was sliced in half. The sword proved to be extremely sharp. The man looked proud as he said, As I said, there is no weapon in this world sharper than the couple swords. Do you have any other questions, old mister? Zhou suddenly recalled his unnamed weapon and thought he might as well give it a try. It was rare to have a heaven-grade weapon ready for him to try his weapon. If it were destroyed, it meant that the unnamed was just a piece of rubbish, and he would not feel pity throwing it away. At the thought of that, Zhou slowly raised his hand. In the blink of an eye, he was already holding an exquisite and tiny sword. He did not say a word, and just as he was bringing it down toward the short sword, the man hurriedly said, Don't do it, old mister. Why? I can tell that you have a good sword, and I'll feel bad if it's destroyed. The man said, It doesn't matter. As he said that, Zhou hacked the man's short sword with unnamed. A crisp metal-on-metal sound rang, and sparks flew out in all directions. Zhou looked at unnamed. It was not damaged, nor was there a scratch. Then he looked at the short sword of the couple swords and found that it was intact as well. That confused him. The result meant that the unnamed was at least the same grade as the couple swords. The problem was why it could not damage the piece of scrap metal in the secret chamber. Could it be that it was more suitable to take the shape of a shield, since it could transform into all kinds of weapons? Meanwhile, the man gave unnamed a surprised look and said, I can't believe there's a weapon in this world that can resist the couple sword sharpness. Little Yuana muttered, That's because you are ignorant. Do you believe that my grandpa can break your crude weapons in half with just bare hands? For some reason, a scene that Zhou had seen in his previous life came to his mind. It was a video clip of 2 girls showing off their older brothers to each other, comparing whose brother was better at eating shit. He found that Liu Yuana was showing signs of going down on the same route, so he quickly reproached her, Be quiet. After saying that, he turned and walked toward the heaven-grade rooms on the other side. Looking at his back, the man said lightly, My name is Zhou Ping. I hope I can see you again, old mister. That sounded quite strange, but Zhou ignored it and went into his room. With the couple swords in his arms, Zhou Ping went into his own room. Once inside, he placed down the swords, and it was then that he heard a clear, cracking sound. Puzzled, he pulled the short sword from its sheath. To his horror, he saw a clean cut in the middle of the blade, which split the sword in half like a piece of tofu. How is this possible? He was shocked, and his heart ached. He had regarded the sword as his life, and yet it was destroyed now. Is this the work of that old man? A swordsman valued his sword above all. When his beloved sword was destroyed, he would do anything to avenge it. Zhou stood up furiously as he took the longer sword and pulled open the door, walking out in a towering rage. He had just reached the first corner when a man in blue robes blocked his way. The man was smiling with his arms crossed over his chest, and his aura was ordinary. There was nothing unusual about him at all. "Please let me through," Zhou said while frowning. The man in blue robes kept his smile as he said, "I'm sorry. Make way." No sooner had Zhou said that than the man raised his right hand, drew a sword from his back, swung it as quickly as lightning, and put it back into its sheath. His movements were natural, smooth, and completed in the blink of an eye. It was as if he had practiced it over tens of thousands of times. After that, he walked toward the heaven grade room, without even looking back. Zhou was holding his long sword with a shocked look on his face. He stood there, unmoving, as if it had turned into stone. A few moments later, the long sword cracked and broke, falling onto the ground. Plop! Then Zhou fell to the ground as well, with blood gushing out his neck. Inside the room, the swordsman in blue robe sat expressionlessly beside the table. With a smile on his face, he said to himself, "Where are you, master?" The swordsman in blue robe stopped smiling just as a figure suddenly appeared outside the window of his room. "What's the matter?" he said faintly without looking at the window. "Sect Master has ordered me to tell Senior that the sword freak, Qinwenjia, has arrived in Runan 2 days ago, and he asks you to be careful of the experts from the Clarity Sect and the Righteous Sect." The swordsman glanced at the figure and said politely, "Thank you. There's one more thing. Old Senior G of the Evil Sky Pavilion is likely to have arrived in Runan as well. Sect Master wants to know what your plans are." The figure spoke in a hesitant tone, as if he were a little afraid. "It has nothing to do with him." The swordsman's voice grew lower as he said. The figure instinctively took a step back. The swordsman smiled again as he took the kettle from the table and poured a glass of water. "You don't have to be afraid, my friend. The wind is strong out there. If you have nothing else to do, please come in and have a glass of water. This junior needs to report back to Sect Master. Farewell." The figure blinked and disappeared into the night. The swordsman shook his head helplessly, but he did not stay in the room for long. After a short rest, he turned and jumped into the darkness, disappearing as well. The next morning, as soon as Zhou opened his eyes, he heard noise coming from outside his room. Then he heard a knock on his door, which made him get up. Old mister, it was the innkeeper. Zhou got out of bed and opened the door suspiciously, only to be greeted by the innkeeper and several officers. The innkeeper's face was covered in sweat, but before he could speak, the leading officer already cupped his fist and said, "Did you see who killed Zhou, old mister?" Zhou had a puzzled look on his face. Zhou was dead? He turned to look at the door of the room where the man stayed. 2 soldiers were dealing with a puddle of blood on the ground there, beside which was a broken sword. Meanwhile, 2 other officers searched the room. The room was empty, however, so they could not find anything. Zhou was a divine court expert, but he was killed quietly without putting out a fight. This proved that the murderer was most likely a nascent divinity tribulation expert. Zhou shook his head to show that he did not see anything. The officer sighed and said, "Zhou was an expert of swords. Whoever could kill him must also be an expert. It is normal for you not to see it. Zhou had enmity with someone?" Zhou asked. The officer frowned and studied Zhou for a moment before speaking in an unfriendly tone. "Don't ask what you shouldn't." Although Zhou death had nothing to do with Zhou, the fact that the murderer was an expert brought him a bad feeling. If Runan were a huge trap, and he knew it too late, then it would be very difficult for him to get away. When I ask you a question, you just have to answer it. Zhou showed him the imperial token. The officer glared at him and was about to lose his temper when he saw the token, and he wilted instantly. He's someone from the imperial clan. He trembled and dropped to his knees as he cried out, My lord!" The innkeeper was struck dumb. Meanwhile, The other soldiers knelt without saying anything. When they saw the token, their faces froze and their heart raced as they immediately went down on their knees with the official in charge. It was then that little Yuan came out of her room, while yawning and rubbing her eyes. When she saw the people kneeling in front of Lu Zhou's room, she said, "Grandpa, do you want me to beat them?" As soon as the innkeeper heard her say that, he collapsed and sat down. Lu Zhou waved his hand, signaling her not to interrupt. Then he continued asking, "Who is Zhou Ping exactly?" "He is an expert of swords, and he had taken a couple swords by killing his own brother. Due to his profound cultivation base, the local authorities could hardly touch him. Then, why was he in Runin? This, I don't know. These people were just some low-level officers and soldiers, and they had little access to cases involving divine court experts. It was normal for them not to know such information." Little Yuan ran to the crime scene and glanced around before running back, as if she had made a major discovery. She said excitedly, "He was killed with just one sword strike, which cut him from here to here." She pointed at her own body. "Oh, the murderer killed him from the front." Lu Zhou nodded. The murderer should be an expert of swords who owned a heaven-grade weapon. In his memory, a number of people met these criteria. The person who killed Zhou Ping could be the sword freak Qin Wenjie, the sword genius Jian Aijin, Luo Chongqing from the Luo sect, or his treacherous disciple, Yu Shangrong. Just as Lu Zhou was pondering, a loud noise was heard from outside. He and the kneeling officers and soldiers all showed a puzzled expression and looked outside the inn at the same time. "Yuan, go and have a look." "Yes." Lu Yuan jumped directly from the upper floor to the ground floor before running out of the inn and coming back a short moment later. "There's a flying chariot outside, which belongs to the Temple of Great Emptiness," the little girl said. "The Temple of Great Emptiness?" Puzzled, Lu Zhou turned and walked downstairs. Little Yuan followed, leaving the group of people kneeling and looking at each other, wondering whether they should get up or not. When he came outside, Lu Zhou looked up at the sky. The huge flying chariot had flown to the edge of the city, but the bald monks flying around it were still faintly visible. Judging from the symbols on the chariot, it indeed belonged to the Temple of Great Emptiness. "Let's go." Lu Zhou retracted his glance. "Oh!" Soon, they headed north of Runin. As soon as they were out of the city, little Yuan whispered, "Master, we are being followed." Lu Zhou said nothing but nodded. This was why he had been taking little Yuan with him. She cultivated the supreme purity jade slip, which made her perception far exceed that of cultivators at the same realm. Moreover, she was witty, and she could protect herself even if they met a strong enemy, saving Lu Zhou's energy. Lu Zhou had planned to ride his mount to the holy altar, but now that they were being followed, he had to deal with it first. "Please wait a moment, old mister." The stalker finally lost his patience. Lu Zhou and little Yuan turned slowly and saw a young man who looked less than 30 years old. "What do you want?" "I want to buy something from you, old mister." Little Yuan said angrily, "We're not selling anything. Go away." The young man paid no attention to little Yuan and just stared at Lu Zhou. "The fact that your short sword could destroy the couple swords proves that it is an excellent sword. I am willing to buy it at a high price," he said. Lu Zhou asked calmly, "You were there yesterday?" The young man nodded. "That's right. I had intended to discuss this with old Mr. yesterday, but an expert was present, and I had to avoid him." Lu Zhou nodded and said, "You like swords?" "I regard swords as my life, and I love them to the bone," the man said slowly.